Once again, we are moving to another distinguished group of panellists. We have Mark Peters, I've introduced before. April Palmer is Chief Executive of the American Australian Chamber of Commerce, and I'm going to be asking April about ways in which our alliance can be strengthened, ideas on that regard. Mal McComas is a very experienced investment banker who is involved in many areas, for example, the privatisation by way of a public float of Commonwealth Bank. He's involved in the airport privatisations. He's involved in multiple areas in the resource and mining sector. Mal is one of the most trusted, and also the healthcare sector. Mal is a very experienced director, a corporate governance best practice and so on, a leader in his field, chairman of multiple companies. So thank you, Mal, for coming along. Appreciate it very much. And Bill Calcraft was formerly he was an Oxford Blue. He went to school with me, just to disclose a conflict of interest. He went on, he was a Wallaby, and then he went to Oxford, got a Blue, and then he worked in alliance with the Z, UBS, other investment banks, and he's one of the most experienced people in financing renewables, and particularly wind financings in Europe. He works 6 months of the year in Europe and 6 months a year in Australia, correct, Bill? Yeah, roughly right? Yes. Got it right? Thank goodness. Okay, great. And everyone knows the distinguished the Honourable Deborah Wynne-Smith. This panel is going to address ways in which we can strengthen the alliance, different ideas. I won't talk very much other than to say how can we leverage the strategic relationship between the two countries. And we'll start off you perhaps, April, because you have to go in about 25 minutes. Is that right? 25 minutes from now? Okay, make sure. If you need to leave, please just go at your own volition. Thank you. April, would you like to open the batting, please?
Well, thank you. I say the alliance is already very strong, but since we're talking about innovation and ways that we can leverage the strengths in each other's countries, I was thinking about the assets that we already have that we can focus on. And first of all, we have the Foundation of Trust, which Ambassador Synadinos did a good job of talking about our shared values, the alliances that we have, the ANZUS Treaty, Five Eyes, the Quad, more recently AUKUS, open markets, democratic principles, rule of law, IP protection. It goes on and on. We know that foundation of trust that we have between our countries, but it's worth emphasizing, Charles, as you did, that those shared values make it important that we work together, and it gives us a competitive advantage that other countries don't have. America and Australia have friends and allies. Other countries have customers.
Yeah.
So we should focus on that and not brush it under the carpet. We also have world-class institutions like what you've focused on here today. You've had many of them up on the panel, and some of them are here with me today. So I'd say the Australian universities are world leaders in things like quantum, biomedical engineering, space tech, and clean energy. And if you match that with US capital, scale, and commercialization, then that turns into a real engine for innovation and growth. Talent, obviously, is increasingly mobile and connected. We've seen that through AUKUS, critical minerals, the bilateral efforts on climate, and then AI. So building real pathways for collaboration between our governments, businesses, and academia is another path that I would push us down along. And then finally, what we have in this room, the business leadership. We have the best of what both countries have to offer. The US companies investing in the Australian future, and Australian firms accessing the global value chain through their partnerships with the United States. So those were the ones that I thought of to strengthen the alliance.
Bill, do you want to address this point?
No, I'll just add to that, because the other advantage we have is location.
Which one?
Location of the
Yes.
country. In our position in the Pacific and relative to Southeast Asia. Same reason the alliance from World War II existed, didn't it? So that's something that Australia has to offer in this sort of relationship, yeah.
Very good point, Bill. Mel? Please.
Oh, thanks, Charles. Just on the resources side of things, we're a natural ally with the US. We have the biggest mining company in the world, BHP. It's an overnight success. It's only been going for 140 years. And we have a mass of critical minerals and not so critical minerals as well. We've got great supply chains. We've got a great educational environment for the mining industry. We've got a natural cost advantage. We've got short supply lines to the US and to Asia as well. We've got so many opportunities to go on there. We need to focus on what America needs. We're the puppy in this relationship. We're not leading the dog, you know. So we need to focus on that. People have talked about critical minerals. That's one thing. My involvement in lithium is not a critical mineral. It's an essential mineral, but it's abundant. And we're making great progress in that area to support the US's initiative there. We need to really start thinking about terming out our policy initiatives in Australia. 3 years of government is not long enough to develop this policy platform that is intergenerational, that goes on 10, 20 and 30 years. We've got to start thinking about 4 years. We've got to develop these national centres of excellence, both on resources, on science, on technology and on education, that have got to be 50-year, 100-year organisations. We're a young nation, we can get there, but with the support of the organisations that have been represented today and you've been talking about, and the very nature of this forum, that's just a fantastic initiative that we should actually grasp and build on.
Thank you, Mal. That's excellent. Mark, I'd like to ask Mark about PPPs that you've used in the US before, best practice, and then before, Deborah, would you like to start before we ask Mark, please?
Well, I would like to add what my colleagues have so beautifully articulated, and the one addition in the partnership is the respect that Australia has around the world. I think Australia has a lot of soft power that they don't use. And I know Australia plays leadership roles in many organizations. I mean, the Secretary General of the OECD is Australian and others. But people like Aussies. They like your culture. They like your arts and you know, the wildlife. The image, you know, of Australians is positive. I can't think of any dimension where people don't like Australia. That is a very valuable, intangible asset. And I don't think it's leveraged as much as it could be. So I would just add that to what we've been talking about all morning, because, you know, there is concern that, I mean, I was just at a meeting in Europe where there's a lot of anti-American feeling now. Visible, you know, there's for a variety of reasons. I think Australia recognizes the imperative to restructure the global economy. You know, we cannot go on having massive import-export imbalances. You know, John Maynard Keynes, right before World War II, began, he had a very interesting proposal to create a global institution to deal with these imbalances. And what's going on, you know, with many of the policies that people, particularly in Europe but elsewhere, are feeling very hostile to President Trump on the tariff issues, is a lack of recognition that the imbalances in the global economy have to be addressed. And it's painful. And it's going to take some time. And, you know, I'll just give the example again of Europe. And you were with me at the Delphi Economic Forum, where the Europeans cannot believe that, you know, with a few exceptions, they haven't paid their NATO contributions. They still don't want to. Yeah. They have allowed their energy security to completely plummet, so they're very energy weak. And they have, you know, a very weak defense capability, even if they put money in it, and huge tariff imbalance with the United States. I mean, I would ask anybody in the room, Google the tariff structures between the United States and Europe, and you'll be shocked. So the idea of the reciprocity in tariffs and rebalancing the global economy is something that I believe, and I believe this way before President Trump started it, has to be done, and it needs to be done in a way that doesn't hurt our allies and partners. But I think Australia has so much to bring to the table in their role, as you said, anchoring in the Indo-Pacific. The only thing that I have sensed in these almost 4 days now of going with you and others, meeting people, is in spite of the heritage of being risk takers and coming to this country from England and all over, leaving behind, somehow that risk-taking and adventurism of the Australian DNA has a little bit lost, because people tend to be more cautious here than I would have expected. So I've learned a lot about that. So how do you restore that daredevil Aussie spirit would be another thing that would be added to the need of future strengths.
Well, that's been exactly my point, Deborah. I agree totally. Mark, over to you on methodology here. How do we do the optimal structure of a relationship? PPPs, can you perhaps expand on that?
Can I first sort of build on what they've already said, if that's okay, Charles?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
I would say, others have said this, we have a strategic innovation alliance.
Yeah, we do.
But I will tell you from my perspective, and I think from a U.S. perspective, what's different now, I wake up every day thinking about China as a strategic power competition.
No.
They're a competitor, they are a threat. And I think that's for the 21st century piece. I think, and it was discussed, Brett mentioned speed. Others talked about it's moving so quickly that I think that's the alliance has to figure out how to adjust to that.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's not a political statement. I can tell you that from the U.S. perspective, they are the competitor and the threat, and we need to respond to that as a nation, and we are.
Yeah. April, over to you.
I would say, I was in Washington last week. I'm also chair of AmChams in Asia Pacific, so I led a delegation of 29 AmChams from the region. We had a day with the administration, a day on the Hill, and a day with think tanks. China came up in every single meeting. The next most common was AI, and then following on energy dominance, because we need the energy to power the AI. Climate didn't come up once, but China is the pacing threat, and everybody is well aware of that.
Bill?
Charles, I haven't got anything to add to that, really.
Okay. Mal?
Okay, sorry, keep.
I was just going to pick up on that point that you make, April. We've had 40 years of unbelievable growth in Australia. It won't be the same for the next 40 years unless we seriously address the issues that we're dealing with. We need a blueprint. We need it driven not by Canberra, because they will never drive the blueprint. We need it driven by large established corporations and growth industries in Australia. And look, the 4 dots that we can contribute to from Australia are energy. We have an abundance of it. We've talked about that. Minerals, same thing. Technology, we're emerging, but we've created some amazing advances in that area. But we've got major education reforms to put in place, as we've heard today, to achieve these things. Who doesn't want to have a healthier, richer, smarter life? We all do. But I think for the first time, we're now seeing a coalition of industry leaders putting together this blueprint, and they're saying in real world time, we have to do it. It won't be driven by political will, it won't be driven by consensus, it will be driven by leadership.
Yeah.
We've had a leadership vacuum in the country, unfortunately, on big policy issues for 50 years. Since the Keating Revolution, that brought Australia's economic position into the real world with structural reform, and it's about time we need to start kicking that can down the road a bit further and a bit quicker.
Good point. No, what you're saying, Mal, is time is ripe. Deborah, you raised the other day language and communications. Energy poverty were your words. Energy poverty. If Australia doesn't grasp all of the natural resources we have, gas, uranium, we're going to continue. My electricity price in the last 12 months has doubled. I don't know of anybody else, but mine has doubled. Most people have told me their electricity price has gone up. Why shouldn't we, with all the uranium and gas we have the lowest electricity prices in the world? And South Australia have very high electricity prices, and a lot of that is renewables, and that tends to be more expensive. But Deborah, do you want to address this energy poverty argument you've been putting up before?
It's really not energy, it's power.
Yes.
You know, I don't know who said this, but as an archaeologist, I love it. You know, we didn't leave the Stone Age because we ran out of stones. And every generation, you know, of innovation is driven by power. And so it's, you know, what are the sources we need to power this economy that is rapidly changing, you know, with the merger of AI and quantum and the tremendous digitization of everything. So, you know, the other issue that I wanted to bring in to everyone's outstanding comments here is that manufacturing matters. It has always mattered. And at our peril in the United States, we allowed ourselves to think, we're going to do the advanced R&D, we're going to do the design, and you know, we're going to arbitrage labor, and we're going to outsource it. And we created a lot of, you know, other economies that had growth and things. But what we learned to our detriment was we lost the next era of innovation by not doing the manufacturing, because they're co-mingled. So part of the strategic alliance, and it relates to energy, if we could move forward and have the partnership around strategic minerals, materials, I mean, I'm going to push again and again. To me, the biggest big project we could do is to come together and see who else we bring into this to figure out how to process rare earths and critical materials in a new way that obviates China's advantage. I have heard that going to one of their rare earth processing centers is like being worse than in a Roman slave camp. The environmental degradation, how people, I mean, nobody goes in to see that. Climate people don't care about that, but we have to figure out how to process these materials at scale. And part of the partnership needs to be the US and Australia need to work together on the manufacturing of everything. Joint production, building the workforce here, high-paying jobs here and in the United States. There are going to be huge jobs from all of this. So I want to bring in, as part of the partnership, and we heard it even in the bio discussion today, you have to make things. You can't just design and hold the patents anymore.
We'll put that
Can I
on the
just add-
agenda. Precious earth minerals processing. So who would like to speak next?
Oh, I was just going to say, mineral processing, exactly the issue. I mean, we're lucky with Linus and Aluka leading some of that area with co-investment in the US and in Australia, but the value-added piece is what we need here. But again, going back to our policy settings, our energy policy setting has been flawed for 30 years.
Yep.
How could anybody think that we could transition from being the biggest thermal coal exporter through Newcastle and being the biggest producer of gas, which has given us phenomenal economic advantage over 50 years, especially in Victoria with Bass Strait, the Northwest Shelf, which I was involved in financing for Woodside,
Yep.
the first billion-dollar project financing in this country on a non-recourse basis. And now we're fighting a rearguard action to have those sort of natural advantages which gave us the cheapest power of developed nations in the world for decades. It was a natural advantage. We've lost that.
Yeah.
So that's the policy setting we need to readdress.
Yeah. So we remove a prohibition on uranium. We do more processing, start processing of precious earth minerals, which is a very good idea, Deborah. We should put that on the agenda. The next one I just want on the agenda, we're 10 minutes. April, where do you need to go?
Don't worry about it.
You okay? I'm just worried about you. And Stella, we've got 15 minutes left, have we?
5.
Documented 2:10. So we've got 15 minutes. Precious 15 minutes. Okay, next point. Capital-free runway. An idea. Why not remove all tax between the Australia and the United States, an exclusive bilateral agreement to remove all taxes, withholding tax, capital gains tax on capital flows, licensing arrangements, as long as it's credible and satisfies both jurisdictions in a credible way of integrity, between Australia and the United States, plus death duties. Now, there are some children of American citizens who live in Australia, but they can be captured by the death duty arrangement in the US. Now, that's just a slight red herring there, April, but I'll put that. All of the taxes, withholding tax, capital gains tax on capital flows between Australia and the United States, what if that was exempt? And that would have an increase in human capital flow between Australia and the United States. And it builds on this trade we're suggesting on uranium and precious earth minerals. April?
Anywhere you can remove friction in our trading relationship would be beneficial. There are a number of considerations out there right now. I was with Representative Darren LaHood last week, and he has introduced a bill. It didn't get into the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, but he's going to reintroduce it in the next Congress to move America from citizen-based taxation to residency-based taxation. So that would help a lot of Americans living in Australia, Americans living everywhere, working for American companies or helping our allies build their economies to eliminate that burden that they have. But the same thing for companies that you're saying, it would be beneficial for us to be able to move forward without all of those impediments. I agree.
Yeah, Mal?
Oh, the friction you mentioned is absolutely critical. Just to develop a mine, it used to be 3 years, it's probably now 7 years. It's tens of thousands of pages of submissions. It's 20 environmental reports, it's Indigenous reports, it's geological surveys, it's occupational health and safety. It's become an absolute burden. And that's the friction of doing business. And, we need to be easy to do business with. So we need to rethink from the ground up our regulatory environment for the development of these new opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. Bill, any comments?
Well, Charles, it's a difficult question, I think.
Bill, any comments?
I suspect your suggestion from the US position would be relative to other opportunities around the world and in Europe and what have you. So I'm not sure how you structure
I'm
that.
focusing in this discussion
Yeah,
not on
capital.
Europe, but on Australia-US relationships, trying to find ways of strengthening relations between the two. That's why I'm...
Well, it'll strengthen, but it's also relative to other opportunities.
Yeah, sure. No, I
from the
appreciate
American
that. There is a
perspective.
competition. Bill's right, actually. There is a competition for capital. I mean, Arthur and I advise an organisation that does have offices in Chile and Brazil, Canada, and USA, and Europe, and they do business in Holland and Australia, have the assets in Australia, but there is a competition for capital globally, and if the price and structure is more attractive in Australia and the obstacles removed, as Mal's saying, it'd be more attractive for me to advise, I do advise the chair of EIG, as Special Strategic Counsel is my term, to the chair on where they should deploy money in Australia. I don't have control outside of Australia, but my preference is Australia first. And in some ways, we all should be, as citizens of Australia, should be starting to think about an Australia first policy. Australia first policy. Make Australia great. Do you like that, April? Make Australia great. How does that sound? And play more golf. So, Deborah, any comments?
Well, I agree that removing friction, having certainty for long-term investments is critical. I don't know if we could accomplish everything in your vision of the capital-free highway, but I think the concept of it's very powerful. And even if we only got a few pieces of it, it's good as a goal for the future. One area that's kind of related to this, but builds on Australia's strength and our weakness, is your super funds. I remember when you were saying, Charles, that the super funds, the future funds, you could come into the United States and invest in all the infrastructure modernization we need. The other area where we don't have any ability really to invest in some of the things we're talking about, and we've called for it for many years, we don't have a national infrastructure bank in the United States. And it's interesting when you look at Exim Bank over the years, I was on the board for many years, we could give loans for exports of U.S. Product services around the world, but we couldn't support our own industries at all. So maybe having a joint infrastructure bank between the two countries where we could pool capital and invest together in some of these big, big things that are going to take a lot of money would be another area that we could put on the agenda.
One of the ironies here is Australian Super, our biggest superannuation fund investor, which doesn't invest in countries, it invests in companies, an important distinction, is really priced out of the Australian market purely because of concentration issues. They're investing 70 cents of every dollar offshore now, and that's going to be the future. It's going to probably get more diversified as they look for growth opportunities outside of Australia. One piece of innovation, I think, is that Australia needs to do really hard is look at the royalty structure in this country. It's on a state-based for mining and minerals. It's on a federal basis for offshore petroleum and other offshore assets. But it's been completely flawed, because if we were Norway, we'd have a hundreds of billions of dollars. We'd have a future fund which would be in the trillions by now if we'd actually structured our PRRT and tax environment for offshore resources exploitation in an advantageous way for the nation. Yet we've given that away to the to foreign sources of capital. So we need to look a little bit internally as well. There is no shortage of capital for mineral processing and resource development in Australia. It's the taxation of that in Australia which benefits Australia, and the royalty structure needs to be addressed, and across all states and territories, to make it a flat playing field.
Yeah, powerful point. Stella, will you make sure you record all this? That what Mal said is gold. Absolute gold. No, I mean, it's being recorded anyway.
It's all being recorded,
It's all
don't
being
worry.
recorded?
It's all
Great.
recorded.
Bill, do you want to add to that, what Mal's saying? No? April, do you need to go? Would you need to add anything more? Mark?
You do not want the technologist to comment on any of this.
No. We've got to, well, certainly, you're welcome, though, for Australians, policymakers, or prospective ones, to come to you and to go to Oak Ridge as well, Katie, to come and brainstorm ideas with you and how we can work together. Are we welcome to do that as a country?
Of course, it's the government. We work on behalf of the government, so
Yeah.
so I think the Australian government reaching out to
Yeah.
the U.S. government saying we want to tap into the expertise of
And
St.
we're grateful
Miter,
to
the
you.
National
We're
Labs.
grateful
That's
to
something
you
we
and
do all the
Katie
time.
for doing this, because this is
Yeah.
what we need. Is bipartisan, and we are working together, two countries together, and we would like to do that. In fact, we will aim to do that. Come and see you and see all the credible organisations that are decent, good citizens of the United States, to see ways in which we can work together to strengthen the ties, to advance our country, to improve the standard of living for our country. Because the whole raison d'etre of these two bodies, and I'll conclude in saying this, is to improve the standard of living of both countries. We're allies together, we work together, we play together, we have fun together, and that is the end of the session.